Genocide is a specific intent to destroy partly or completely a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group by killing its members or by other means.
A refugee is unable or unwilling to return to their country of origin owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion.
Ethnic cleansing is a purposeful policy designed by one ethnic or religious group to remove the civilian population of another ethnic or religious group from certain geographic areas by violent and terror-inspiring methods.
On behalf of Mrs. Zachariou, the primary school principal, we'd like to welcome His Eminence Metropolitan Petros of Accra, Ghana, His High Commissioner of the Republic of Cyprus, His Excellency Mr. Antonis Mandritis, the Consul General of Greece, Mr. Konstantinos Chatzitomas, the Educational Attaché, Dr. George Blakos, the Chairperson of the SAHETI Board, Mr. Anthony Katakouzinos, the Life Vice President of SAHETI Board, Mr. Vios Kokoris, the Executive Headmaster of SAHETI School, Mr. Warwick Taylor, the Principal of Greek Studies, Kyriantonia Papazoglou, board members, honored guests, parents, staff, and our SAHETI pupils. And now we would like to ask His Eminence Dr. Petros Barginos, Archbishop of Accra and school chaplain, to come forward for the memorial prayer.
Please stand.
Χριστός ανέστη νεκρών θάνατο πατρίσας και της εν της μνήμαση ζωήν χαρισάμενος. God of all consolation and of eternal life, we remember today our brothers and sisters of the Pontus region, the victims of genocide and ethnic cleansing. We remember with sorrow the many thousands of innocent lives destroyed brutally because of hatred and prejudice, the young dreams that were never realized, the old age that was not spent with family and friends. Along with them, we remember also the Greeks of the rest of Asia Minor, along with the Armenians and the Assyrians, men, women, and children who were deported, driven in death marches, massacred mercilessly, and we commend them to your loving embrace. May they live now in your eternal peace. We praise you for all those who stood firm in their faith in the face of persecution, exile, and death. May we, as children and descendants of these noble martyrs, feel a deep sense of gratitude and responsibility. May their example teach us to live without prejudice and violence, but rather with compassion, forgiveness, and respect for one another and all people. For you are the resurrection, the life, and the blessed repose of your servants, and to you we give glory, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, now and ever and unto the ages of ages. Amen. You may be seated.
"100 years ago, Sweden was a beautiful city in Asia Minor on the shores of the Aegean Sea. A city where Greeks, Turks, Armenians, and other nations lived in peace. But there was a war between Turkey and Greece. At the end of this war, a terrible crime was committed. A crime against humanity. Hundreds of thousands of Greek men, women, and children were forced to leave their homes in Sweden. Thousands were forced into slavery, and many were killed. The Metropolitan Chrysostomos, who was the head of the church, was tortured and put to death. The Greek soul of the city of Sweden that was alive for thousands of years was obliterated in a few days. This is the story of Aristoteles, a young Greek boy that witnessed the fire, the death, and the destruction.
My name is Aristoteles, and I'm 16 years old. I now live in a refugee camp in Mytilene, but a few weeks ago I was living in Smyrna. I attended the Evangelist School, the best school of the Greek community. When the Greek army arrived, we were so happy. At last, Smyrna was Greek again. However, soon afterwards, the army was forced to leave. The Turks told us not to be afraid, but we did not believe them. We started hearing that stealing, burning, and killing had begun in the villages close to the city. They put my father in prison because they said he cooperated with the Greeks. I never saw him again. The Turkish cavalry, along with Turkish soldiers, patrolled the streets, terrorizing anyone who was not Turkish. We started to live in fear. This is what I saw with my own 2 eyes.
Pontos and Smyrna, a year drenched and stained in blood, a year full of tragedy and fear.
The nation, the Greek nation, murdered and slaughtered.
We will never forget. For death.
Genocide! Genocide! Pontians killed! Punished for their religion?
Churches burnt down.
A holy war?
A bloody war.
Unwelcome knocks on the door. Families no more. Papudas yayades taken away. Mothers, fathers, sons and daughters nowhere to be seen. Pontian soldiers fighting to survive. Fighting to survive. Pontian never again.
The fire is burning, burning flames.
For
The destruction of Smyrna. The fire is burning, burning flames.
For
Everyone is silent.
You must remember, even in times of darkness and despair, God's presence has never faltered. Our faith has never dwindled. We call on you, our future generations. Hold hope in your hearts. Hold courage in your hands. And never forget. We will never forget.
The hospitable sea, or Eftsinos Pontos, is a sea in the north of Turkey. On its southern shores, a Greek civilization flourished along with others, like Armenians. The Greeks in that area were proudly called the Pontian Greeks. At the beginning of the 20th century, almost 100 years ago, the Turks decided to expel all other populations in what later would be described as the ethnic cleansing. Men were forced to join the Turkish army or were deported through death marches in the desert. Women and children were forced to leave their homes overnight. Another terrible crime against humanity was committed. Hundreds of thousands of Greeks, Armenians, and Assyrians were forced out of their homes, and most died in these death marches. This is a story of Eleni, a young Greek Pontian girl who witnessed the uprooting, the persecution, and the hunger that followed.
My name is Eleni. I'm 12 years old and I live in a refugee camp in Thessaloniki. But a few weeks ago, I was living in a village near Trapezunda, a wonderful city along the shores of the Black Sea. At school, I was friends with Elia, an Armenian boy, and Ivan, a Russian boy. I also went to school with Osman, a Turkish boy whose father was a policeman. At school, we learned that Trapezunda was one of the most important cities of the Byzantine Empire, a great Greek empire. One day, Osman's father showed up to my home and told my father that he should join the Turkish army. When my father refused, they arrested him. I never saw him again. I cried for days. At night, I could remember the happy memories with him. In my dreams, I saw him and my mother dancing at my aunt's and uncle's wedding. I think the dance was called Gotsari Seranitsa.
Melisome.
Γεια σου, Kiran. Γεια σας, κορίτσια. Τι κάνετε? We came to watch our friends dance in today's celebration. Is that why they're wearing those costumes?
Yes, they're traditional Pontian costumes.
Please tell me a little more about it. Yes, of course we can.
In Pontian dances, men and women usually form a circle, a kingdom, and they hold each other by the wrist. They dance with their bodies straight and their arms sometimes dropped or raised like this.
The Pontian dances are performed to the accompaniment of lira music played by the lira player. A lira? What is that? This is a lira, my dearest friend. That is so cool.
The steps of the dances, the movements of the body, and the expression present something special. The main feature is the trembling movement of the whole body and the small steps. Watch.
Even though most of the dances are danced in a circle by men and women, the Sarah dance isn't. Why is that? Sarah is the war dance of Pontus. It got its name because it was danced mainly near the river Sarah. This dance is faster and everyone squeezes closely together. It is extremely powerful.
It imitates battle shapes and it is accompanied musically by the sound of the lira and the drum.
I can play the drum. You'll have to teach me the steps though. What about the costumes? The women wear beautiful skirts called tiponia. They wear decorated tapeliki on their heads and they dress it with big earrings and jewelry. What about the boys?
The men's traditional costume got its name from the pants, with the narrow legs and the wide feet, which is called zipka. Zipka means the entire Pontian menswear, which includes vest, jacket, hood, belt, and boots.
I love it! I want to become a Pontian dancer.
Let's go watch them dance!
After they took my father, my Aunt Maria and my uncle Alexandros came to stay with my mother and I. One night, the soldiers came. They broke the door open and my mother started to scream. I held onto my uncle's leg, but they dragged him away. I never saw him again. After they left, I hid with my aunt and my mother in the cellar for 2 whole days. We were afraid to leave the house. Giria Sophia, the kind lady who lived next door to us, came and told us that my uncle had been killed. Why? Why? I could not understand. I cried until my tears dried up. We could hear the screaming, the crying, and the pleading from the streets. The city was burning. It turned to ashes.
Η πόλη που κάηκε ξαναγεννήθηκε στην άλλη όχθη. Ένα με το κορμί μας, κυλάει μες στο αίμα μας. Και όταν ονειρευόμαστε, περιδιαβάζουμε στα περιβόλια της και σεριανάμε στις πλατείες. The city that burned down is reborn on another bank. It is one with our body and flows in our veins. And when we dream,
We wander in its orchards and we stroll in its squares. Every time we begin to sing, our words turn to ashes, and the music is a protest, like flames carried by the northern winds of the Aegean Sea. The city of the East lives within us, and for 100 years now, it judges us. Κάθε φορά που πιάνουμε τραγούδι, είναι τα λόγια μας τα χτιά και η μουσική παράπονο, σαν πυργαλιά που κουβαλάει το μελτέν. Η πόλη της Ανατολής μας κατοικεί και 100 τώρα χρόνια μας δικάζει.
They told us to get ready in an hour to leave our homes. We would never return to them. They allowed us to pack one bag for the entire family. Suddenly, we found ourselves and many of our neighbors traveling far away from our homes. I couldn't understand why we had to leave. As we said goodbye to our village, I heard the bells from the monastery, Panaya Sumela, ringing continuously like a far cry.
Then we saw the fire from the basement's small window. I could see smoke and flames. I think it came from the Armenian neighborhood where my friend Anush lived. My mother told me that we could not stay in the house any longer. We needed to head for the harbor, find a boat, and leave. So we ran out as fast as we could. We then witnessed the great fire. I could feel the blazing heat upon my face. When we arrived at the beach, we saw a massive crowd of people pushing against each other. They were shouting and begging the captains of the boats to save them. I could see a big ship waiting. I recognized the Greek flag. I started crying out in joy this time. I felt hope. The image of the ship stayed with me for the rest of my life. And at that moment, I decided that one day I would make ships of my own to help others. We stood in the great square where in the past we celebrated our great Greek National Day on the 25th of March. I danced with my classmates a magnificent dance called Kasapia.
Time passed in the carriage. The sun was blazing and I couldn't stop coughing from all the dust. The rain would break the heat, but by the end of the day we were soaking wet. I remember being hungry all the time and constantly asking my mother where we were going, but she didn't know. I remember the soldiers shouting constantly and beating anyone who fell behind. I lost count of the days until someone called, "Thalassa, would finally get some rest. As we boarded the ships, I started to cry again. The world we loved had been left behind, and what would ever happen to it?
Ο κόσμος που αγαπήσαμε απομένει πίσω από τα σειρματοπλέγματα και τους ξένους στρατούς. Ζει σαν φάντασμα μέσα σε έρημα τοπία. Μπαινοβγαίνει μέσα σε χαλασμένα σπίτια. Διπνάει σε εγκαταλειμμένα τραπέζια. Ο κόσμος που αγαπήσαμε απόμεινε ένας δρόμος σπαρμένος με πτώματα. Ένα ξερό πηγάδι με 3 αγνώριστους νεκρούς. Μια πόρτα ανοιχτή σε μισοχαλασμένο σπίτι που τη χτυπά αδιάκοπα ο αγέρας. Ένας νεκρός σκύλος με φουσκωμένη την κοιλιά του, σαν σακί, πλάι στην εξώπορτα. Δεν μπορούμε να το συλλογιστούμε αλλιώς, παρά μονάχα όπως τον αφήσαμε τούτο τον κόσμο. Και ολοθέλουμε να γυρίσουμε για να βάλουμε τάξη.
The world we love is left behind the barbed wire with the foreign armies. It lives like a ghost in deserted landscapes. It enters and leaves damaged houses. It dines at abandoned tables. The world we loved remained a road littered with corpses, a dry well with 3 unnamed dead. A door opened to its half-ruined house that the wind beats incessantly. A dead dog with its belly inflated like a sack at the front door. We cannot think of this world otherwise, rather than just as we left it. And we always want to return and to put everything back as it was.
For the love of God, come and prevent the destruction. These are the desperate words of the Metropolitan Chrysostomos, who wrote a letter as he tried to summon help from the great powers just before he died in the streets of Smyrna.
It was not only Smyrna that was burned and destroyed. The elimination of Smyrna's Greek population was a heinous crime that was planned and executed across Asia Minor to build a modern Turkey.
However, from all this devastation and pain, hope was also born. The Greeks that were exiled from Turkey came to Greece and brought with them their skills, their culture, and their underlying will to live. They built new cities to remember in order to honor their lost but unforgotten motherland. Nea Smyrni, Nea Philadelphia, Nea Peramos, Nea Ionia.
Many of the refugees left an indelible mark. The story of Aristoteles, the boy from Smyrna, is the story of Aristoteles Onassis, the ship magnate, probably the most famous and inspirational Greek tycoon of all time. Countless other stories of hope arose from the ashes.
The most important thing is to remember. Every year on this day, we have a duty to remember. Why? Because we must never repeat it again. Never again. Pote xana. Never again. Pote xana.
intentional killing of one human being, not for what they have done, but because of who they are. It is said that sound can dehumanize people and turn them into numbers. What was done at Auschwitz and at other concentration camps during World War II was done with arrogance, with a firm belief of exercising dogma by people who had absolute control, power, and knowledge. These are the words of Dr. Jacob Bronowski, a British mathematician, scientist, and writer of Polish-Jewish origin. Dr. Bronowski was the child of a survivor from Auschwitz. He felt he owed it firstly as a human being and then to the members of his family to inform and educate society with his writings. SAHETIans, our primary school teachers, are going to read to you one of Dr. Bronowski's writings.
Dear teachers,
I am a survivor of a concentration camp. My eyes saw what no man should ever witness.
Gas chambers built by learned engineers. Children poisoned by educated physicians. Infants